Hi there, my name is Audrey and welcome to my studio. Today we're going to really get to know our paints by creating a swatch grid together. Watercolors is so wonderful to work with because of its transparent nature. So the way that I did my grid shows how the colors look at different values. For this lesson, you'll need the following: watercolor paints. You can choose maybe 3 to 4 colors that you want to compare, or you can be ambitious and do all of your colors. A flat brush. You can also use a round brush, but I like the flat so that I can get right up to the edge of the squares. A pencil and an eraser, watercolor paper, some cups or jars of water, a mixing tray or a palette that has mixing areas, a ruler, paper towel or cotton rag, and washi tape or masking tape. Let's grab our supplies and get started. All right, let's talk about the grid for a little bit. If you have a cutting machine or are really good with an X-Acto knife, you can download this grid that I have as a PNG file, and you can just put it into your Cricut Maker or Silhouette software and then have the squares cut out, or you can just cut it out yourself with an X-Acto knife. Make sure to check out the links in the description below. The other option is to use a ruler and just manually, make the grid yourself. Either way, it's fine. I just like to work a little bit easier because I'm lazy. Now you can make this grid as large or as small as you'd like. My squares are about 1 inch wide, and my paper size is 5.5 inches and then 7.5 inches this way. I basically had a large watercolor paper pad by 11 inches by 15 inches, and I just cut that in half. And then I sized my grid to fit on here, and then voila. So let's go ahead and sketch this grid onto some new watercolor paper. Okay, I'm gonna place my grid on top, and to keep it in place, I'm just going to use some skinny washi tape. I love washi tape. I have maybe too much of it, but is there such a thing? Washi tape is great because it's not as tacky. It's repositionable. Plus, it's really cute. Then I'm just going to take my pencil and lightly sketch out each square. All right, and then you can very carefully just peel it off, and look how easily that came off. Then I'm just going to save this grid with the tape in place because I can always put it on another fresh sheet. So why don't I go ahead and just reposition it, because I actually just remembered I'm going to need to use 3 of these. So why don't I go ahead and sketch the other 2 real quick. I already have a few that I sketched the grid on, so I'll just reuse this. But I'll still reposition my tape on the next one, just in case I want to make more. So there we go. All right, next let's think about our colors for a little bit. I'm going to demonstrate using my primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, but I'm going to use 2 different hues. For reds, I'll be using the Carmine Red and Permanent Red. For yellow, I'll be using Cadmium Yellow Light and Gamboge Yellow. And for blue, I'll be using Cerulean Blue and Cyan Blue. Now the brand that I'm using is the Lucas brand, so feel free to check out those same colors or choose whatever primary colors you have on hand. As you can see on this sheet, I fit 2 color combinations. I compared the same blue at the top, then I compared different pinks here at the bottom. So you can do the same if you'd like, but for today's demonstration, I'm going to do pretty much this, but slightly different. Since I'm technically using 6 colors, I should have a lot more variations, but we don't have time to do that, but I do want to at least show you how I do my grid. So not every type of yellow and blue and red are gonna get, all the different combinations, but at least you'll see one color combination happening. Now, the way that I like to do my grid is that I love to show the value, because that's the beauty of watercolors, being able to have different values just by changing the amount of water that you have on your brush. And so some mixing grids don't really show the value, and I used to make grids like that, and it wasn't that helpful to me. Some grids I've seen where you have, multiple colors or the same colors on the X and the Y axis, and then, as you get to the intersection, right, then you show the mixing. And again, that works if you just want to see how it looks when you mix those two colors. But again, for me, it didn't really help me, because I needed to know, well, what happens when I have too much water? What color then is it going to be? And so that's how we're going to approach our grid today. Now, if you want to show more variation in the value or even just in the color mixing, instead of doing, a horizontal or a vertical layout like I did this way where I fit two, you can turn it this way and then have, the single color up here and then show 4 values, and then have a wide range of mixes or the mixture coming down this way, and then have the other color down here at the bottom. So really up to you how you want to do it, but I'm just going to demonstrate this way. So again, for me, these grids are super helpful because I use pretty much the same colors very consistently. And you can see in my palette, there are a couple of colors that I've used so often. And so that way I can quickly reference my grids, find the color that I want, get the 2 colors that I need to mix, but then also look at how much water I need to add to get to that color. And I highly recommend this for beginners, not starting out with like 100 different colors, because it's going to get really overwhelming really fast, and you're not actually learning how to mix your paints or how to work with them. So start with about 8 to 12 colors max. I know I have more than 12, but that way you can really hone in on the colors that you really love. And then you'll be able to remember the mixing ratios and the water ratios a lot faster and not have to rely on the grid so much. Let's get started with our first color combo, red and blue. I'm going to start with the red values up here, and the carmine red is going to be here on the left, number 1061. I'm going to wet my paints just a little bit with a spray bottle. And for the first square, it's going to be the darkest value. So I want little water and a lot of wet but not runny paint. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up some of that wet paint, but I'm also going to transfer it into one of the mixing areas because I am going to mix it with other colors. So I want to put some right there. And again, try to keep it as, thick of a consistency as possible. And I'm also going to put some on the other corner because I'm going to need it later for the yellow and red combination. But for now, let's put the red there. Now, with the paint left over on my brush, I'm just going to go ahead and paint that first square. And this is why I like using a flat brush, because you can get right up to the edge. Doesn't have to be a perfect square. The value is more important than, how well you filled in the square. Now, to show the value of our paint color, I'm going to swish around my brush in the water just for a moment and then blot it and then paint the next square. So basically what I'm doing, I'm removing some of the paint on the brush into the water, right? And then adding water in the process. I'm going to swish it around for like half a second. That's it. Flick off some of that extra water, blot, because I don't want too much water because then it's going to, make my color a lot lighter. And then paint the next square. And it should be visibly lighter in value. And then do the same Swish it around for just a hair longer because we want to show the lightest value in this last square. And if it's still too dark, you know, swish it around some more, blot it some more, and then quickly just spread that out. Because again, you want the lightest value, not so much that it's like white, but you want it pretty light. I'm gonna wash the rest of that off. I'm gonna do my permanent red in the next one. Same process, wet it just a little bit to activate it, and then transfer some of it into a mixing area. Now this permanent red is, it already has a little bit of orange in it. So that'll be interesting to see what happens when you mix it with the other colors, especially yellow because it's already kind of orangey. So perhaps it's going to turn out, you know, even more orangey. And again, throughout this process, all I'm going to do is just leave the paint on my brush and then paint the square. Yeah, it's a beautiful like red-orange color. I actually use this color a lot, and for some reason I have two pans of it, and you can see one is already like, you know, like half gone. Okay, so same process, swish it around in the water cup just a hair, blot, paint the next square. You know what, it's still pretty dark. Go ahead and do the same for the last square. Okay, on this one, I'm going to be using cerulean blue down here in this corner and then cyan blue on this side. And so this is where the mixing gets a little bit trickier. So this row right here, it means that it's going to have more red than the blue, right? And then this row will have more of the blue than the red, and then this is that pure color. So we're going to work on that. I'm going to go ahead and activate my cerulean blue color. And again, I want a pretty thick consistency, right? Only when we start adding water do we want our consistency to be runnier, but on the palette, I want it to be pretty thick because the process by which we are doing these values is just by washing out the paint. So I don't need to add too much water to my actual palette unless the color has dried out, which in this case, my red sort of did. So I'm gonna activate it really quickly with a spray bottle, just with like a drop of water, not too much at all. And I go ahead and pick up the cerulean blue, really coat my brush with it. And I'm going to kind of paint down here in this corner of my mixing palette. Lay some down there. I'm gonna wash out my brush. It's a pretty purple color now. What I'm gonna do is pick up some of this blue and then go into this red, because remember this row is mostly red and just a little bit of blue. Let's just pick up that fresh paint and then mix it up over here. And if you don't really see a different color happening, maybe pick up a little bit more of the blue, right? There we go. But again, this mixture should be mostly red and not so much blue. So go ahead and paint that next square. And then same process that we did for the values, just swish it around a little bit. You know, my first square was already kind of watery. So my last square is going to be pretty light, which I'm okay with. Okay, you can see that the blue is kind of already merging with the red over here, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and mix the two together. gonna add just a little bit more of the blue in here. Just because this color should be visibly different than the one we just painted too, which is a little bit more reddish purple, right? So this one should be more blue purple, which it is. And again, it's really important that your paint consistency is not so runny, right? Otherwise, you're gonna get what's supposed to be the darkest value is gonna be like medium value. Go ahead and wash out that brush. And let's do that last row, which is just gonna be pure cerulean blue color. Oh, such a pretty color. All right, there you have it. Now let's do the same for this side, but this time I'm gonna have a different blue. Now again, I'm mixing up my different reds and blues on one single sheet. If you want it to be, very structured about it, you can have that same carmine red on this side and then compare the different blues. So again, really depends on how you want your grids to look and what's most helpful to you. I'm gonna go ahead and activate my cerulean blue. Work that into my brush. And my permanent red dried just a little bit, so I'm gonna add just a little bit of water. Now they're all mixing together. I'm gonna drop that in here. And try to mix it with more of the orange. Oh, this is really interesting because it almost looks brownish to me, right? Which kind of makes sense because blue and orange are on opposite sides of the color wheel, and so when you mix them, you are going to get a brown color. So this is really interesting. It does look purple still a little bit, but it's more purpley brown. Okay, as it's getting lighter, it's reading a little bit more purple. I know this looks more blue than anything, and that's probably my fault because I probably didn't thoroughly mix not only on the palette but also on my brush. And so basically what's happened is that some of the leftover blue was still on my brush as I was, washing out the paint, but it remained behind. And so this, unfortunately, is not really a true values test. This should be slightly, just a little bit more brownish purplish like these colors. But, this is just a demonstration. I will probably redo this, but for now, you get the basic idea. Okay, to this mixture, I'm gonna add just a little bit more cerulean blue because the next row is gonna be more blue. So I'm gonna try to mix it a little bit more thoroughly. This is a pretty color too. And then let's paint our last row, which is just pure cerulean blue. Wow, look how bright that is. That's really pretty. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same for the other two color combinations, and then I'll see you at the end. And there you have it. We just painted these grids together, and I hope you got to learn a little bit more about your paints today. There may be some of you that's feeling like, I'm wasting paint. Why am I painting these grids? But let me assure you, it will save a lot of time. And again, getting to know your tools is one of the best fundamentals when it comes to painting with watercolors. So for example, if I wanted to paint a peony, but I needed like a coral type color, right? I don't have that color in my palette. So instead of trying to experiment and, just hope I get the right color, what I can do is then reference this sheet right here, and I can see that maybe this is the color that I want. So then that means I need more of this permanent red color and a little bit of this cadmium yellow light, and then water it down just a bit so that I can get to that color. So that way I'm not wasting so much time, because time is important too. And the more you do this, the better you're getting to know your paints, but the more you're actually building your intuition and your confidence when it comes to color mixing. So drop a comment below. Let me know what brand of paint you're using and what color combinations you did. You can also tag me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Audrey Raw Design, and you can use the hashtag #PaintWithAudrey. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.